You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 239, Malevolent Creation, hosted by Dan Terry.
Whenever that song starts, and it's just like, boom, boom, like the very first time you hear that, like my eyes open in the morning.
Geoff Kane.
Dude, this is fucking crazy. This is good. Why the fuck have we not listened to this band before?
And Joseph Wren. But what you should never do is make your record sound like shit on purpose. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you end the torture by listening to Jane Doe, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is Geoff.
That's right. Jeff's back for 2 episodes in a row. Can we make it 3?
Maybe.
Put him on the spot. We're so happy to have Geoff back on the show. This is the show that you guys love. This is the show that you guys want. And
this is the show we guys love too. So I mean, it's not just the listeners. We have a blast doing this too.
I agree. I mean, I'm having a blast right now. I don't know about you guys. I think we need to start doing some more in-person stuff. Just get like real close. You know, we're all we all got the injections, right? We should.
Yeah. I was gonna say with my left eye almost swollen shut because allergies.
Absolutely. Just come over here, man. Just give me a big old face rub. You know, that's what I want. But Malevolent Creation's a band that people have asked us to talk about. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. I don't think I ever listened to a single note of this band prior to us doing the episode, which is weird because it's like, wow, a death metal band from the early 90s got past me somehow. And I started thinking about them again. I was talking to DJ from Living Sacrifice, and he was like, hey, man, you know, we like toured with Malevolent Creation, right? Like, you know, we did that. And I was like, I feel like I know that you guys did that. But now that you think about it, I guess I should listen to some Malevolent Creation. So I can imagine in my head what an early, you know, like Inhabit era Living Sacrifice playing with I guess it would be like a 10 Commandments era or a Retribution era Malevolent Creation. I'll have to double check the years on that. We've recently got a little bit of flack about not double checking the years on things.
I've definitely heard of this band before. I remember them being mostly thrash. Turns out, just listening to the old records, guys. Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, after you get to a certain amount, that's all that you really needed to listen to. Maybe I'm going to piss some people off. I really don't give a fuck.
Jeff's coming in with the hot takes.
Oh, fuck me, man. It was so bad at the end of the discography.
Oh, man. I wouldn't say it was bad. Like, I'll fight you on that a little bit.
No. It's bad because it's like water torture. It's just the same shit over and over and over. Tell us what we want to know. We're going to play the same shit.
Yeah, but we've done that with different bands, right? I mean...
Yeah, but that shit was good.
Slayer got a free pass. Granted, okay, I will say
I was not on the Slayer episode, and Slayer does not get a free pass from me.
Shit. Slayer Revisited incoming.
I will say this. At least Slayer... not every album sounds the same from Slayer like every album from Malevolent Creation sounds the same. Even Napalm Death displayed a level of variation in their sound, and like Cannibal Corpse even, you know, because I remember even on the Cannibal Corpse episode we were like, yeah, man, they just did the same thing again. I'm not gonna lie, I still think it's great, but it'd be cool to get some variation. And then the next record they'd give us some variation. They'd throw some groove in there. They'd throw in enough elements for me to think that I didn't just buy the same Cannibal Corpse album again.
Yeah, and to make things clear, through the 5th album, I'm on board. But after that, fuck this band.
Well, before we get into all that, I think we
sorry.
I think we need to let Joe do his plugs. He's turning purple over there.
Yeah, like people are already like disconnecting. Nope, fuck that. Don't want to hear what Geoff has to say.
Just like old times.
Yep.
Well, before Geoff boots up his copy of Nilhogg and is subjected to multiple stab wounds, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan's going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, I'm not going to even tell you about them as much as I'm just going to read one. We got a 5-star review on Apple Podcast from John Frias, or I'm going to go with John Frias. If I'm wrong, dude, just hit me a DM. I'll say it the right way next time. I pinky swear. But he gave us 5 stars. It says, Fear Before. I found this podcast because I'm the 0.001%, the type of person who searches for Fear Before the March of Flames on this thing. Bravo, these dudes know their stuff. And that was myself, Joe, John Beatty, and we had Dewey from the Hear Pleasure podcast on for that one. And it was a good episode. I remember that one. I remember I had a lot of space dust during that one.
So much space dust.
I think I ended up calling the Always Open Mouth by Fear Before the March of Flames the Citizen Kane of post-hardcore. and I still, that wasn't just the beer talking. I still stand by that statement. But over on Patreon, we got a comment in reference to our most recent episode as of the recording of this one, for Motley Crue, featuring John Drake of the Nerve Herder Console podcast and Talking Into Infinity, the Dream Theater podcast. Lost Fiction says, loved your Star Wars talk with John in the beginning. Can we have an episode where you three just talk about Star Wars for 6 hours? Yeah, I think that's perfect, since it's just going to be the 3 of us and Geoff won't be invited.
No. Yeah, I don't, because we know that I would have some opinions that would piss off John Drake, since I'm a book fanboy.
Join the club.
Yeah, Dan was talking about that Thrawn trilogy, and I looked at my Audible subscription and said, I'm going to have to make some purchases. Because if Dan says listen to the extended universe or whatever they call it now, well, then I just have to do that.
Well, I mean, all I'm saying is that if they bring Thrawn into live action, it needs to be Benedict Cumberbatch. That's all I'm saying.
Fuck yeah. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't think he'll do it. I think he made a statement about never touching Star Wars. But, you know, actors change their mind all the time. Usually has something to do with the amount of money they're offered.
Yeah,
I know Disney's got a couple of bucks saved up.
Yeah, if he doesn't want to touch it, my second choice would be John Rhys Meyers,
the
guy from the Tudors.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I think he'd be a fucking, because he's got the crazy eyes, and then you put red contacts in on his eyes on top of that. Dude could make it work big time.
That sweet blue skin.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of blue dead skin, I mean, are we going to get into Malevolent Creation?
I guess.
So, Dan, tell me about Malevolent Creation.
Oh, I am so glad you asked me that, Joe. Malevolent Creation.
You're just glad you get to talk about the first albums.
Yeah, I mean, I love the first few albums. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. But, you know, Malevolent Creation is an American death metal band. They are from Buffalo, New York. And of course, as most bands that form in the late 80s or early 90s that play a particular style of death metal, they did have to relocate from New York to guess where?
Florida!
You got to move to Florida, then you have to have Scott Burns do your first album.
I'm sensing a pattern here, gentlemen.
I mean, that's just what you have to do. Malevolent Creation is one of the big, and I don't want to say bigger, and we're going to get into this about tiers of death metal bands, but they were kind of an underground sensation. So like you had obviously more popular bands that sprung up, like Cannibal Corpse and obviously Death, Obituary, all of these much bigger bands. And then you had Malevolent Creation, who I don't think ever really achieved the same level of success as some of those bands, but definitely had a longer career than a lot of these bands did. And they kind of start off in more of like a thrash metal sort of genre. I would say that their first couple of albums, or what I like to lovingly call and frustrate Joe with, death thrash, where it was like kind of a transition between thrash metal and death metal. Like
they were transitioning, a real genre, man.
They were transitioning from thrash metal to death metal. And one thing I really like about these more thrash influenced death metal bands is like, so if you look at a band like Obituary, where they're all about the detune, the slow, the sludge, all of that stuff, which is kind of more of a staple of death metal, they lack the aggression of a band like Malevolent Creation. Because whenever you're playing thrash, you're playing fast. And if you're not, you're doing it wrong. So these guys come at us very early in their career with a mixture of piss and vinegar that I think a band like this really needs to stand out from their contemporaries.
1991, The Ten Commandments.
I'm gonna let Geoff go first.
It's, in my opinion, more thrash than death. I actually don't have a problem with Brett's early vocals. Normally, I'm just the opposite. I normally piss on people in the beginning and start to enjoy them the further I go along, and it's just the opposite with his vocals. It's just pretty much just straight ahead underground Florida thrash. I mean, that's kind of what I got, with a tinge of death.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's quite literally what we got. I mean, there's, that's the one thing that if you're asking for about a Malevolent Creation, if you want something straightforward, to get pumped up or pissed off or to release pent up frustration, I tend to like a lot of the heavier stuff just because I actually use it as a pressure valve, so I don't go off on somebody else. I listen to the music. So, I mean, yeah, this will get everything taken care of for you. It's not going to stand out. It's not going to be anything super duper special. I do think that we're going to get a 3 actually special albums from them. We're not there yet.
So you're saying when you've had the worst day and you're about to go off on everyone, you pay very close attention to the 10 Commandments?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, if you want to piss off your parents, you're listening to the 10 Commandments. This is really, really aggressive. It's certainly aggressive, guys. These gentlemen need to calm down. The thrash metal gives them an aggressive edge, like I said earlier, that I feel like a lot of early death metal bands kind of lacked. I'm not saying stuff like Scream Bloody Gore wasn't aggressive, because it certainly was, but that was also kind of a death thrash sort of combination. And I think that's really the key for a lot of these early death metal bands, is they come out swinging, maybe even before they have the down-tunedness that they're going to get later. But what you have with the 10 Commandments is just an angry, highly energetic record that you can't wait to get off of work, get off of school, go to the show, jump in the mosh pit, and just go crazy. And Malevolent Creation, has a message that you're, at the very least, your church pastor's not going to like. Your parents are certainly not going to like it. Your friends and family are going to stop talking to you, and you're not going to care because you got that T-shirt and you got that tape and you're ready to rock. And I think that this band, while not necessarily being original, I think that's one of the biggest problems with Malevolent Creation is I don't necessarily think that they're original in the same way that a lot of early death metal bands were not original. Seemed like everybody was trying to kind of eat a piece of Death's cake or a little bit of Slayer's cake. These guys are trying to have both pieces of cake and eat it too. And really the only issue I have with the 10 Commandments is I feel like the lead guitar work could be a little bit better. They could be a little bit more present, I guess, is really what I'm saying. This is so straight ahead that the lead guitar doesn't really shine that much. But again, I'm not going to be as harsh on the band for something like that on their first record.
When you're playing this type of death metal, especially in 1991, you're primarily thrash influenced. So take away the vocals, it sounds like every Scoop the Mids thrash record you've heard, especially from the late 80s and the leftovers in the early 90s. There's nothing unique about it. So is it interesting enough to listen to against something else? I don't think I've ever reached for Malevolent Creation. Like, that was a band I had to listen to. But I used to say the same thing about Overkill. And some of those early Overkill albums are really fucking good. So this one might be on the list in the future. It definitely has the name to piss everyone off in 1991. I think Dan's right. They're trying to pull something that Death was doing way better out of this style. And it just sounds like 1991 to me. And I don't mean mainstream 1991 like Metallica, Enter Sandman. I mean where thrash metal was at that time. That's what I'm hearing. So it's fine.
Can you say that part again, about the part about me being right?
I think Dan's right. They're trying to pull something that Death was doing way better out of this style.
All right, perfect. And that's just the way it is, folks. You heard it right here. Not even gonna have to seek any retribution now.
Oh, it's time. 1992.
I think it goes without saying. This one's a lot better. This is. I'm gonna say this a lot during this episode. It's kind of more of the same, but just better. The songs are better. They're faster. They're angrier. The vocals start taking on almost a little bit of that early Morbid Angel sound, like Altars of Madness sound. They're a little bit more raspy, a little bit more angry, a little bit more death metal. And I think so. Like if the first record was 1/3 death metal, this one's like 2/3 death metal. Man, like it's definitely a lot more in that vein.
Yeah,
it's easy even to just call it death metal, but like. It's faster. The production sounds a lot better to me. It doesn't sound quite as flat and as thin as it did on the first record.
Agreed.
And this is really where I start getting a little bit more excited. The lead guitar work is much more present and upfront on this one. And you just have to accept with Malevolent Creation that they're not going to be that death metal band that starts with a melodic intro for a song or does like a creepy, atmospheric thing.
Yeah, they'd have to be from Gothenburg for that.
Yeah, they're gonna play as fast as they can. They're gonna throw out some Cat Strangler solos, and you're gonna love it. Again, just like the 10 Commandments, you're gonna be moshing and thrashing the entire way through.
Yeah, the other thing I like about this, they actually use the theme music to my introduction to one of my favorite actors, and that's Michael Rooker. And that is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, but yeah,
yes,
okay.
Yeah, it's a great intro.
Yeah. So I that got me excited, just because I like what I like. So that just piqued my interest. And you're right. You can tell that they are moving in a particular direction with purpose. It's still plenty fast. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's this slowed down melodic death metal, but it's definitely death metal. There's no melodic. And that's because it's just straight up death metal. And it's not straight up. It's mostly, though. I like this a lot more than 10 Commandments. Retribution, I think, is a step in absolutely the correct direction for what they have. I think this works better with the group. I mean, they just sound a little more cohesive. And part of that could be like what Dan said, the production value is much better. So that always helps in making cohesion, makes it sound like they're working together.
I did think it was absolutely hilarious that Dan said they don't do the melodic, creepy intro thing during the intro of Eve of the Apocalypse.
Well,
that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm talking more. Okay, so yeah, every death metal album, every good death metal album needs to have some sort of creepy introduction track. But I guess what I'm saying is the rest of the music. You're not going to get 5 tracks into a Malevolent Creation album and then suddenly they're going to start with some melodic thing. Like this isn't a Gore Guts record, right? So it's not going to have kind of the spooky graveyard sort of thing going for it.
Yeah, their songs
I actually think is kind of refreshing that they're not just like straight death, gore. I mean, they are a little bit, but it's more peppered in there just to be there.
Yeah, their songs collectively don't have beginning, middle, and ends. It's just
the beginning is the whole song.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's what you're trying to say is, a lot of that mellow death stuff, they build, and it rises and they just come blasting out of the gates on most of their stuff.
They come blasting at the gates on most of their stuff. Is that what you said?
No.
Do I need to make a top 5 Gothenburg death metal bands video?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Overall, this album is better. It has the better thrash production, but the riffs are still there. The song just starts. There's no structure. It's as old school thrash as you can get. Some of my favorite riffs are the ones where nobody slows down except the drummer, and then he picks right back up. You're going to hear a lot of that on this album. It's the 10 Commandments, only better. So in 1992, you're in if you're listening to this because you're pissed off about the Black Album, and you're pissed off about what Metallica is doing to heavy metal. So here we are.
You're still pissed off a year later.
Absolutely. It never stopped. Load and Reload fine records. Thank you very much. I think Malevolent Creation is doing just fine as we move into 1993, Stillborn. And here we are, one album every year. Quantity over quality? Or quantity good enough for 1993?
Well, the first two albums are definitely quantity over quality.
Yeah, Stillborn is a shining example of fantastic death metal, in my opinion.
We've built the trilogy. We went from the 10 Commandments all the way to Stillborn.
Yeah, this is where Dan and I started sharing tracks back and forth about, we're like, dude, this is fucking crazy. This is good. Why the fuck have we not listened to this band before?
It all came together here.
Yeah, it really did. I was shocked after the first two. I mean, in my opinion, this is just a massive, light year leap forward. This to me is just night and day better than 10 Commandments and Retribution. Stillborn is probably at the top of the heap for me with them. And if not, it's in the top 3.
What you get with Stillborn is more like we talked about how there wasn't really a lot of song structure on the last 2 records. This is where they start really honing that in. This is where you start getting a little bit more. I wouldn't necessarily say beginning, middle, end, because there's enough of Malevolent Creation in here from the past for it to still be them. I guess, if that makes sense. But now you have much, much stronger lead guitar work. The solos are better. They're well thought out. They feel much more composed than before. The songs actually kind of have a flow. There's a flow even to the track listing. It all works really, really, really well. It's a little bit longer, more complex album than what we had before. Because I think the last 2 records, it was like 30 minutes in, out, done, which is, don't get me wrong,
Thrash.
which is perfect for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to overstay your welcome, and you're playing faster than everyone else anyway, so you might as well be brief.
And it's 1993. Everyone was clearly listening to Pantera, because it has that groove metal vibe that was big right around Vulgar Display of Power. Right down to the production. It almost sounds verbatim like this is what it would sound like if Dimebag played death metal.
I was just going to say that, that it's got that big sound to it that, I think everybody, probably is trying to do like the Cowboys from Hell thing or a Vulgar Display of Power thing where, you just want to make the guitar super, super loud. And for a band like Malevolent Creation that's going to literally fill every single second of that guitar noise on a record, it makes everything just pop so much harder than what you'd had on the last records. Because I feel like thrash metal in its purest form is usually pretty thin sounding. It's not necessarily about the low end. It's okay for the low end to be there, but I don't know. You add a little bit more of that low end into this like thrash death metal sound, and all of a sudden the riffs start sounding majestic. Like they're cool to hear. They're cool to just let kind of that sound wave pour over you. And I think that's what's really great about this one. And let's not forget about the vocals, which I think are
that's what I was going to say. That's
probably their best vocals, like bar none.
I might take a little bit of umbrage with that, but I think it's Brett's best vocals.
That's fair. I mean, I think that it's their best vocals so far.
Oh yeah, bar none. I was going to say the one thing you were talking about with thrash. The whole idea with thrash is it's bright and it's thin and it's to make your ears bleed.
Yep.
That's thrash. And with death metal, there's a little bit more. I don't want to piss off. I don't care. I'll piss off thrash fans. Death metal just has more complexity to it. There's more peaks and valleys. I think that's why I enjoy it more than thrash in most instances. And that's why it might have been just the fact that I had the 2 previous albums that had more of a thrash overtone that was kind of a primer for me. So whenever this came in, it actually made me enjoy the death metal elements of it even more, just because of the contrast. I mean, I know that on Retribution, they were starting to do more death metal, but on this is, considerably more complex, and it is more. I think it's like we all said, is better put together. It's just the complete show, in my opinion, on this album, and I was thoroughly surprised and pleased. And like I said earlier, Dan and I were texting each other back and forth, like, where the fuck have we been? Why have we not been listening to this album? We text, we'd message Joe, but all he would just say is trash.
So much thrash. It never ends.
Joe's in heaven. Joe's like cleaning the house, blasting, Malevolent Creation really loud. And he's like, I think you guys are making more out of it than it really needs to be made. Just I'm running on the treadmill right now and I'm thrashing.
I just ran a 4-minute mile.
Than I am, but like
slam dance.
I just sit in my basement and eat potato chips and listen to death metal. I love the vocals on this. This is like the most Florida death metal I feel like they've sounded, as far as like what I actually like about some of the other Florida death metal bands. The lead guitar work I really, really, really love. And like, to me, even though this band never achieved the same like status as like Obituary did, I feel like this album Stillborn is kind of what I wanted Obituary to sound like, and they just didn't for whatever reason. They're like, we're just gonna do a Black Sabbath thing while a drunk guy yells over it. But and there's a market for that, obviously. But yeah, Stillborn absolutely just blew me out of the water. And I was like, that was the first moment when I'm listening to it and I'm like, wait a minute, is Malevolent Creation good?
You've been having that reaction a lot lately.
Yeah, whenever we start talking about some of those 80s bands, when I got through Def Leppard, that was a rough one. I had that same moment. I was like, is Def Leppard actually good? I was listening to their first like couple of records. And then I listened to Motley Crue, obviously had kind of the exact same reaction. But with a band like Malevolent Creation, I shouldn't have to have that conversation with. It's so already in my wheelhouse. And I'm not going to lie, I don't think that Stillborn is like, it's not in my like top 10 greatest death metal records or anything like that.
Not even close, but it's very good for them.
Yes, it's very good for them, and that is worth something. And I think this is where, I'll save this criticism for later. So tune in when we get a few more albums in. But Stillborn's a great release, and I think that if you're just checking the band out for the first time, this might be where you need to start.
1995, Eternal.
And now here is going to be a unpopular, probably hot take. I think Jason Blachowicz, who's normally their bass player, has some really fucking good pipes, and I think that he's vocally the best out of everybody who's fronted the band. Personally,
despite the production changes, this was the first time I noticed the vocals being different. Death metal at this time especially does not need complex vocals. Most of the time they don't even need vocal training. You're there to create a sound with your face that everyone in the room can thrash and slam to, and it's fine. You're there to create the mood. You're there to be the guy on stage who's just going, ah! And maybe it was the step down in quality for the guitars, or the fact that I was stuck on Stillborn. Like, give this band some bottom end and they sound beefy. They sound like 1993 and they're there to play. And now we're going straight back to the previous feeling of the album. I'm okay with it. And I think the vocals actually carry this one forward. I was surprised. It was a Slayer reaction of, we have a bass player doing vocals now, and the band still sounds heavy as fuck.
Yes.
I think Eternal... Yeah, is there even anything else to say?
Nope.
I think Eternal is a much heavier record than anything else that we've gotten from Malevolent Creation. And I think the reason for that is because it's, number one, they slow down. There's a little bit more groove. There's a little bit more majesty, to these super brutal riffs.
It's a jump.
As far as like solos go, this is the best. Vocally, I really, really, really like this. This is the first Malevolent Creation album that I will say straight up is just a death metal record, where they've kind of transitioned out of the thrash sound, and it's starting to resemble more of their contemporaries, or at least their contemporaries from a few years ago.
Right.
Because this is 96. So like, I really think that this is where they really started shining for me. I mean, Stillborn, they did also kind of a glimmer there. But Eternal to me is what I kind of expected this band to sound like, kind of going into it, having that kind of slower, just more evil sounding, dark sounding riffs and indistinguishable vocals. But like, we're still not to like straight Cookie Monster territory. And so I don't know. I like these because the vocals sound pained. They sound painful, just agonizing to listen to, which is what I like.
Yeah, maybe that's why Jason only did two albums. Maybe he just blew the fuck out of his cords doing this stuff. I don't know.
I guarantee he did that.
Yeah, because this is some rough, heavy, intense death metal, and it's one of my favorites. The band can do no wrong for me right now in this era.
There's a lot of caveats there.
Yeah, there's
there is, for me right now in this era.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's using a lot of like false fold stuff, so I don't know how much he actually blew him out, but I don't know. The dude sounds fucking great on it. I mean, I really noticed it. I mean, I noticed the difference and was impressed. I mean, this is one of them that's, I mean, if you can't figure it, it's one of them that's in my top 3 is definitely Eternal. So yeah, I liked it. This was another step, in my opinion, in the correct direction for them, for what sounded good for them. You know, and I'm not just talking about like saying, oh yeah, you know, it's good for them. Yeah, but they suck ass compared to everybody else. I don't mean it in that element. I mean it sounds cohesive. Maybe Brett was, I mean, I don't know the drama. This was, 30 years ago. I don't know if there was drama or something like that, but it seemed like that was just a more cohesive unit once there was no Brett. That's just my personal opinion.
The songwriting definitely improved. There is kind of a correlation there, I think. And I don't know if it was musical differences, which I think, because these records do sound a little bit different, that could have been part of the reason. Like I said, it's 30 years ago, and half of the people involved aren't even alive anymore, so it's hard to really go back.
Yeah, and if you even ask, you're only going to get, like you said, you're only going to get one side or a partial story. You're not going to get the full Walter Cronkite on this one. You're just going to get the spin that somebody wants you to hear.
Is that a challenge, Geoff? Do I need to like go out and seek some band members and do some interviews and do some fly out interviews?
That's going to be the Harry Carey version.
Yeah, that'd be pretty fucking awesome, actually. So yeah,
somebody can say something and I can be all like, "Does that feel like the truth?" Let's try it again from the top. I'm going to ask you this question, and you're going to tell me the truth. No, and I don't care. They were better for it. In my opinion, they absolutely blew away my expectations. And this is where I started to get really excited in the discography, because I was like, is it just going to get better and better? Because like we've had that so many other times on the show, and we had Cannibal Corpse got better and better. Cattle Decapitation really got better and better as they went. A lot of these bands, there's a certain Egyptian themed death metal band that we may or may not be talking about at some point in the future that also, kind of has the same feeling. Spoilers. And so I was kind of strapped in, because keep in mind, we're not that far into the discography. This band's got like 47 records or something like that. I think Buckethead is the only one that has more records. No, but we should do a discography discussion on Buckethead.
Just show me where to be.
415 albums. Let's go. Better get started right now.
I was gonna say my son's best friend, I think, is going to be standing in for me on that episode, because he has like everything Buckethead memorized.
Well, perfect. We were gonna need that, because I certainly won't. I'm gonna get like 47 albums in and be like, I'm done. Like I will quit. But sorry about Malevolent Creation. We don't want to just murder them in cold blood here.
1997.
I mean, this is more of the same in a good way.
Yes, it is.
This is an even more cohesive, kind of a slower ultra. This may actually be as brutal as the band ever got, in my opinion. Just absolutely goes for the throat. This is actually a little bit like the last record, but actually a little faster. They increased the speed to kind of more of that Malevolent Creation speed. You know how there's like 2x, 3x, 4x, and then there's Malevolent Creation X. I think that this is as good as it got, in my opinion. Like they absolutely honed in that great sound from the last record, and they perfected it. Just straight up perfected it. Yeah, well, they had a pretty good drummer on this album too. And who was that, Geoff?
Derek Roddy.
There it is.
Good old one take himself. I mean, It is.
Did you guys see my drum triggers? They sound really brutal and heavy, don't they?
Yikes.
This guy, this album, like you said, is more of the same in a good way. It's brutal as fuck, and that's always a very, very good thing. I don't know. It's probably this is definitely my top 3 as well. It's kind of hard between these 3 in a row to play some first, second, and third. It's kind of like your children. You don't really want to play favorites. On these 3,
yeah, but you love this one more.
Do I?
You just sit them all down with juice boxes and explain which one of them you love the most.
Which one's going to pay for your retirement, Geoff?
Exercise. Oh, fuck. I don't know.
It feels like we're being brief at this point, but keep in mind, it's Malevolent Creation. It's death metal. It's thrash. It's just brutal for the sake of being heavy. And it doesn't really take a lot of journeys through the records. So
go listen to Compulsive, though. That's been my wake up. The intro to Compulsive has been like my wake up song for the past like 8 days. It just gets me pumped up. Like I literally like whenever that song starts, and it's just like boom, boom. Like the very first time you hear that, like my eyes open in the morning, and then I'm like up instantly, and then dressed, and then like ready to go. This song absolutely kills it. Like it's a huge standout for me.
So you did just the opposite of those meme videos we've seen with those young ladies where they all of a sudden hop and then boom, all of a sudden they're missing a pair of clothing. You went in the opposite direction and you added clothing, and then it was time to go to work.
I added clothing because I just feel like the viewers and everybody associated, they want that. They'd want me to add clothing. I could be wrong. Send an email to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. Let us know. This is a very important question.
We're gonna take the video from YouTube to
there you
see
go.
What we get.
There's that fucking beep. I missed it so much.
Hey, you never know, man. It's a free posting platform. Anyway, oh god, okay, we got to keep talking about this, man. All right.
1998, The Fine Art of Murder.
Dude, this is when the shit hits the fan in a very bad way.
Murder.
What the fuck happened on this one? If it had come out in 2002, I could have made an excuse for why this production is so shit. I want to know what happened in 1998 when somebody said, yeah, this sounds great, guys. Let's put it out right now.
Yeah, production quality. I mean, and you're going to have a handful here in a row where production quality went in the wrong direction. Vocal performance is not what you want it to be. There's stagnation when it comes to music. Musically, the endeavors that they're taking, it just kind of falls off a cliff.
It sounds like they couldn't pay for mastering.
If not for the vocals, I honest to God would have thought this was a collection of demos, from early on. Because they're a step up from demo quality, but it doesn't sound great. And don't get me wrong, if you told me this was like the world's first death metal album that somebody unearthed from like 1986 or something, I'd be all like, okay, I'm into that. But this just sounds really bad, especially for a professional band that has is this many releases in. I kind of lost track. I think this is number 6. But like, so we're halfway there, boys.
Yeah,
a little less than half.
It's the sixth album.
Yeah. So like, I don't even know what to do with this one. I mean, the speed all comes back. It's almost like we've abandoned, and this is where my theory of musical differences comes from, because Brett's back, like hitting the vocals hard. And I don't know, man. I don't really like his vocals on this one. It sounds like he's been listening to like Altars of Madness era Morbid Angel, which is normally not a bad thing if the music can match up to that. But David Vincent, he is not, at least old David Vincent.
Vinnie Vincent, what?
No, I said David Vincent. Huge difference.
Okay. You know what's interesting, though? You know who plays lead guitars on this album?
Who is it, Geoff?
It's Rob fucking Barrett.
Yeah.
I wish it sounded better when he played
Rob's a good guitarist. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
his Cannibal Corpse stuff a lot more, but
no shit.
It is what it is.
I don't get it. I genuinely, I mean, I would really I'm rather curious on what the backstory is. If somebody knows it, I mean, frickin' post it for us morons so we can understand.
There's got to be a reason.
What the fuck happened?
Can we give this to Jamie King right now and see what he can do with it?
Now, I do know that there is a percentage of the metal community that's listening to this episode right now that probably posts on Metal Archives a lot. And they're going to be all like, guys, death metal's supposed to sound bad. So you guys are a bunch of spoiled brats. You guys want everything. You guys want everything to sound like Death's human. You guys want everything to sound amazing all the time. And this is just crusty and heavy. And this is what death metal is supposed to sound like. And I'm just gonna have to tell you, you know what? Instead of getting in a big argument with you, you're right. When I'm 6 albums in with a band, I don't, I'm not thrown off by how extreme the band is or whatever it is. But if you have to lower your production quality to become more extreme, then there's kind of an issue there. And again, it's probably not the band's fault. I think maybe this was just we did as good as we could. We had to get a record out. We had to do this. It just sucks because their other stuff sounded better. Now, it's entirely possible that maybe somebody went in and remastered those old albums. And so when us listening to it this week, we're listening to like the really good remastered material. Like somebody's gonna mail me a tape of like Stillborn and be like, see, it sounds like crap too, or something. You guys are idiots. Unsubscribe, 1 star. But like, I want to like this record because I've heard a lot of death metal albums like that have the same production value that are just a lot better. I don't think that the material can help me overlook the production quality. Much the same way if it has good production quality and bad material, I'm not going to be swayed by it either. I think this is just very it's just put out. It goes on for way too long. It doesn't sound good, and the songwriting is really, in my opinion, taken 2 steps back from what it was on the previous record.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, let's be honest here. It just sucks.
Isn't everybody really glad that Geoff's back? He just will straight up say a record sucked. There's people complain all the time. They're like, Dan's become too politically correct on the show, and he uses words like "not great" or "could have done a lot better." Everybody's wanting like another In Flames episode, but I guess I've just mellowed out over time. I don't know what the deal is.
And I haven't even had anything to drink other than a Mountain Dew.
That explains all of it.
Dude,
I'm rocking water out of a hospital cup.
Dude, I'm sorry. I mean, it's bad, and it doesn't get any better. In Venom, the next album,
2000,
it's shit.
Night of the Long Knives. Is that a real song title? Like Night of the Long Knives. We're sorry to anybody that's ever been murdered with a short knife. It should have been a long knife. Really should have been. So like we're talking like a dagger, or what are we talking about here? This is just.
It's Dragon Glass. They're going after the Nightwalkers. I don't fucking know.
I can't even. I don't even know what to say. I mean, even when they re-released it with some bonus tracks and called it Envenomed 2, it's still like.
And it was remastered, and it still sounded like shit.
It doesn't sound good, and I don't know. Like at this point, though, I'm starting to wonder: is this a creative choice?
You know what you were saying. You know what to say next. You already said it. Next. Fuck on to the next album. It's shit. I'm sorry. It fucking sucks. You don't like it? Tough titty. It just. I don't mind it when a band is phenomenal and they don't change because they found their niche and they do it amazingly well. I mean, for Christ's sake, I love Cannibal Corpse. Okay, so I don't want to hear this shit. This is what it's supposed to sound like. More of the same. I'm like, if it's more of the same good shit, then yes. But when it's a pile of stinking feces like the last 2 albums have been, fuck off. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear it. It's horrible. It's considering where we were going and where we have come to. I mean, it's really, for me as a music fan, it's an insult. It went from I thought we were going up the mountain and we just passed out because we got too high in the atmosphere because there wasn't enough oxygen. And then we rolled our ass all the way back down to the bottom of the hill.
Getting really elaborate.
And we just said, we're too fucking lazy. We're not going back up the hill. We're just going to stay down here and wallow in our own shit. And that's what we got.
Geoff, tell us how you really feel.
I think I just did. And the problem is it doesn't get any better.
He's not done.
It just, no, well, no. Yeah, because there's more albums to talk about. Of course, I'm not done. I'm going to shit on those too. I promise you.
I don't have good things to say about this album, but I am curious, what did the original mix sound like? When I heard this, my first reaction was, who was listening to underground metalcore and said, we got to make our death metal album sound like that? Because it has way too many layers of vocals. The drums sound just shitty enough, but the guitars sound like something that was plugged in direct and nobody mastered it. I want to know why we went from having great sounding albums to no mastery. It's just got to sound like shit, guys. Like What show did you play with what band who called you a fucking that now you have to make your album sound like hot garbage?
I mean, if the answer is Mayhem, then understandable. Have a nice day. But I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's because another band called you another name, or that somebody listened to underground metalcore, which is a huge insult to underground metalcore, that year, because there's some great stuff coming out. But I don't know, man. Like, I don't understand the mindset. This wasn't like a contractual obligation. As far as I understand, both of these records came out on different record labels.
Yeah, they did.
Because I'm sure that whenever you put out the Fine Art of Murder, people are like, yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, no, that's okay. We're not going to sign on another one. Oh, we got this new one called Envenomed. Yeah, well, I don't think anybody, we're going to go ahead and pass. Hopefully you guys can find somebody else that'll put this out. I don't know if that's what happened either. I'm just purely conjecture. Don't at me.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know they switched to Arctic Music that's based in Florida, which I find amusing, but whatever.
Well, I think we've gotten that out of our system. I mean, next.
The Will to Kill.
2002.
I think this one's a huge step up. Production wise, it sounds a lot better. That they've gotten into a good studio. You've got a mixed and mastered record. You have a different vocalist on this one, and I think that for the most part, he sounds good.
Ooh, yeah, we disagree on that. I think he
sounds good. I think he sounds a lot better than Brett did on the last two albums.
Well, that's not saying much.
Yeah, but you got to understand where you're starting from. Okay, I mean, I think his vocals, yes, they sound very run of the mill. They sound very run of the mill death metal. Okay, like they do, but like it's fine. It's a death metal band. Like, who cares? Kyle Simmons, I think he sounds good. I think he sounds like a competent death metal vocalist. The riffing has a lot more of that, or not even the riffing necessarily. I think musically they're more or less on par kind of with what they've been doing, but I think it sounds a lot better. Yeah,
tonally. So the mixing, engineering, I mean, that's all better, but musically speaking, it's not better. It's Geoff Dejanay is the one who mixed this, and I mean he's rather prominent. He's the guitarist for Cataclysm, so I mean I think a lot of people know him from that. But he's done a shit ton of production work too. I mean, and a lot of it is his own work with Cataclysm, but I mean I think that's why the production quality is good, is because that dude's legit. I mean, he's done a lot of good work.
I'm gonna have a lot of questions about the next one then, considering this. But anyway, go ahead.
But instead of it being a massive blowout in your pants, it's just a shart. I mean, when is a shart a good thing? I guess whenever you compare it to whenever you have a massive blowout in your pants, that's when it's a good thing. So that's kind of how I feel about this album. Comparatively speaking to the last one, yes, it's better, but it's like, which level of hell am I on? Oh, fuck, you're still in hell.
It's death metal. You're supposed to be on different levels of hell.
Well, they put me through it.
It's better. That's the best thing I can say about it. I don't think it's as good as the first 5 albums, but I don't think it's terrible. If you got off the band after In Cold Blood, this is a good place to get back on. You're never going to get that level of death metal greatness again, but at least this one sounds fun to listen to.
Yep, I agree. And I think also that the biggest issue I'm having with Malevolent Creation this late in the career is, number one, why they're still Malevolent Creation. We're so far from where we started as kind of this fun, death thrash, really pissed off, young, energetic band. Whereas now I feel like a lot of the energy is kind of more or less missing. Yes, it's death metal, but it's also starting to become paint by numbers death metal, where all of the elements are there, all the elements are in place, but this band is literally just existing. They're not really pushing any boundaries, which I don't think every band needs to push boundaries. See the Black Dahlia Murder, I think that sometimes it's okay for bands to, but even a band like the Black Dahlia Murder, I know we joked forever that all their albums sound the same or whatever, but even the Black Dahlia Murder was trying to improve the thing that they do on every album. So yeah, they may sound similar, but you take an old Black Dahlia Murder album and you listen to it, and then you take a newer one, and yeah, they're playing the same style, but they're playing it better. They're playing it more intricately. They're adding more complexity to things. And Malevolent Creation is not. They're just kind of like, okay, do we have everyone together? Okay, so this is our job. So like, let's write some songs. And once we get to like 10 or 12, we've got a record. And then they just put out whatever they do. I don't see this band as being a band that like picked from a whole bunch of songs that were written to make a record. And it's more of like, well, this is what we got. Let's go into the studio and lay it down.
Yep.
So who is ready for War Cult?
Well, I'm going to contradict myself, and I know Dan's going to do it for me.
Go ahead, buddy.
Dude, Geoff Dejanay, I don't know what the fuck he was doing on this one.
Yeah.
What the fuck happened? I mean, this has to be a conscious, like Dan said, this is a conscious decision to sound like shit. It's like, you know what? I think I'm going to take the whole bottle of X-Clax because I think that would be a great thing to do. No, don't fucking do that. Come on. I mean,
at this point, somebody in this band thinks that low production value is the way to go. And when you try and don't give me the whole like, oh, it's more old school sounding, because I've heard your old school records and they sound a million times better than this. You know? I mean, is it entirely possible that maybe their budget just couldn't? No, it can't be. Yeah, the same guy produced it as the last one. The last album we actually praised for having better production. So you've got the same production team in place for this one. And this is where somebody gets in there and says, all right, cool. So let's get in the room together. Let's hang 3 microphones from the ceiling. And that's not really fair. It doesn't sound that bad, but it does sound. I
don't know.
It doesn't sound far
Lynn
off.
Johns did some great shit with 3 mics.
Yeah, this is really bad. This is probably the worst one.
I don't know, man. The next one, it really started to test my patience.
With production value.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's sad. Whenever we're like trying to talk about what the albums are, the production values are so bad that like we can't decide which one's the shittiest. That's just a monstrosity of a clusterfuck.
And it's bad that that's all we can really say. It's not like the album builds and then descends back into madness. It's shit. That's it.
Well, not only that, but like, is it like a Benjamin Button sort of situation where like you start off as an underground band that sounds terrible and then eventually get better, like as you go back in time? Like I don't.
Yeah, like Benjamin
I just don't
Button
understand how it works.
Or Merlin. I mean, they're going. They live their life in opposite direction. I really don't know. It really it's a head scratcher. I mean, obviously, I mean, everybody knows how I feel about these last handful of albums from Malevolent Creation. I don't care for them at all. It's a monumental disappointment because the first 2 are okay, but the first 5 albums, if they had stopped there, fantastic in my opinion. I think I am incredibly happy with their discography. I think it's well worth a listen. And then they just literally like I said earlier, it fell off a cliff, man. I don't know what happened. I don't get it. I genuinely the reason why I'm shitting on it so much is I really don't know what else to say. I really don't. I mean, like I'm genuinely, other than being a potty mouth, I'm at a loss for words. And I just don't understand.
Yeah, even I'm having trouble coming up with something, and I do this every week. Like it's just one of those things where there just isn't a lot to say. And it's not even like they're the most horrible band in the world either. Like they're technically sound, and like every now and again I'll hear a riff that I like. You know what I mean? Like it's not that they're like completely devoid of talent. They've got some talented people in the band. It's just that like
they're going through the motions.
Yeah, there's just not like it's paint by numbers death metal. It's like we have to have these particular elements, and yeah, every now and again you're gonna strike gold with a riff idea, but then it's gonna be over. You know, it's not gonna compel me through. It's not gonna compel me through the sound. And they're so like 90s death metal, even in like 2006, 2007, that like it doesn't even like they didn't even add any modern elements to it, which is not something that I think that death metal bands should have to do. You know, it's not like you have to like suddenly become metalcore or suddenly have to play deathcore or whatever. Like you could definitely, there's plenty of bands that are as old as Malevolent Creation that still stuck to their guns and maintained their core sound, but they haven't even really done that. Really, the best thing that they could have done was brought the thrash back and had a go at it with that, like been kind of more of a death thrash band.
Well, they thinned it out and had the shitty production of early thrash. I mean,
right, but not
that's
good riffs.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's literally all that they brought back with it. I mean, I just don't get it.
All right, I guess we'll talk about Doomsday X.
Yep. Gee whiz, so exciting.
2007.
Okay.
All right, well, that's an album that happened. Yeah, it's really weird too because like I listen to when you start off with like Quarterized, like I actually got kind of excited because I was like, this might actually be good. Then I get about a minute and 40 seconds in, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yep, same thing again, and it's just this one sounds a little bit better. Like, I mean, production wise, it's a little more. This one was actually self-produced, which I thought was interesting.
So they are capable of making a good sounding album.
It's a decent sounding album. I wouldn't say it sounds like amazing, but you got to look at what I got to work with here. And so yeah, it's self-produced, but I think that it does sound better overall. Like certain songs do start off sounding really good, like Quarterized or Dawn of Defeat. There are some good songs on here, or good ideas. I wouldn't necessarily say songs. But it's still like when you take the entire product as a whole, you just don't. It just doesn't have any sort of effect. Like there's no reason for me to go back and listen. A lot of the times when we're doing this podcast and I find a record that I really like, I'll go back and listen to it like 2 or 3 times before we start the episode. That's why, people tend to notice people talk about how we're super negative on the podcast and all we do is crap on bands. But like the reality is we spend way more time talking about records that we like than we spend talking about records we dislike. And this is kind of another one of those I just couldn't find other than like Stillborn and I don't know, man. Like other than like Stillborn, In Cold Blood, Eternal, even maybe Retribution, those are the only ones that I listen to more than one time. Because the rest of these, like it's kind of like going back to the Obituary episode a little bit. I get halfway through a record and then I have to like survive until the end of it, somehow, and it definitely feels like work. And
no, this discography, especially album 6 through 13, 100%. Should be getting paid overtime.
Oh yeah,
to be listening to these. The thing, like you were talking about, going back and listening 2 or 3 times. I even went out. I do the one thing where I feel like if I'm falling into a rut with a band's discography, and I will purposely listen out of rotation, and I couldn't tell the fucking difference. I mean, that's the problem. Is it didn't matter if I went 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Or I took those and I threw all those numbers I had and then picked it out and listened to the whatever album it was. It didn't matter, and that's what sucks. That's when part of listening to this music can be a downer. I mean, I kind of feel bad, that I've shit on them as much as I have. I really don't have, I took all that X-Lac. There's nothing left in me to crap on them. I'm disappointed. I mean, I really am. I guess that's probably, I've disappointed Dad now. I yelled and screamed at my kid, and now I'm just, all yelled and screamed out, and all I got left is the disappointment. And sometimes that's even worse than being really pissed off.
A super fan of this band thinks this is one of the good albums.
And who's that super fan?
I would love to meet them, because I'm not the super fan of Malevolent Creation. But
I'm sure we're going to hear from them.
Compared to some of the bad records, the bad sounding records, I don't think you can say it's death metal, it's supposed to sound like shit. Because anytime you try to make something sound like shit on purpose, you get sane anger. It should sound as good as it can possibly sound, based on what you have available to record, to mix, to master. And if you're just trying to be so punk rock that you don't mix it, we have a different genre for that. It's called black metal.
Did we mention that Brett Hoffman is back on this record?
I don't think we did, but yes, he is back. I mean,
it's a thing that we're going to mention, and then we're going to move on. Yeah, I don't know what to say at this point. And whenever we talk about like production quality and producers and things like that, whenever I see some of the producers they've had on some of these records, I just shake my head. Like, what happened here?
Yeah, because we're talking about, some heavyweights within, the industry that we really respect and enjoyed pretty much all the rest of their work. That's the weird thing about it.
Are we ready?
Yes.
2010, Invidious Dominion.
Okay, so Eric Rutan of Hate Eternal, who I love, and who's now of Cannibal Corpse. He makes really great sounding records. He's very skilled. He's a very skilled musician. I like Eric a lot. I've seen him live a few times. I think he's great. So when I listen to Invidious Dominion, all I can say is somebody in this band just wants all these albums to sound a certain way. And that's what you get. I mean, it's like, it's got to be easy mode, right? Like these producers are like, all right, we're going to try to really pull the true Malevolent Creation out of this. And maybe we're clinging too hard to the first 5 records, because that's what we think Malevolent Creation is. But they've kind of been this longer than they haven't been this.
Well, yeah, it's not even that for me. I mean, I understand, that, it's kind of like we've spoken on, we've had lead singers in bands and we're like, well, why are you still comparing, X singer to Z singer? Z singer's been with the band longer than X was. So why do you keep going back to X? And sometimes it's because it's almost like comparing apples to oranges. It is, there's just a massive quality difference in my opinion. And if you go through, I mean, there's only one individual I think that stays consistent, and that's I think it's the rhythm guitarist, or maybe it's the lead guitar. I can't remember. I think Phil something or other. But anyway, maybe he's the driving force behind the musically speaking side of it, and this is what he is looking for. I don't know. But it's not what my ear enjoys. I'm just it's sad. It's what it is. I don't get it, and I don't. And maybe how could you? Maybe you're jumping from producer to producers because once the producer's like, that's not what I was signed on to do. Even though I do whatever you ask, but that's not what sounds good to me either. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a producer, so I don't know. It boggles the mind that you're looking for a particular sound, and this is, something that we don't care for. So, but hey, somebody liked it. They ended up on Nuclear Blast, so for this release. So wow.
I mean, at some point though, there's still name recognition, and that'll get you somewhat far. They weren't on Nuclear Blast long. I think the next one they're on Century Media. And that's actually the record I'd rather talk about because
Dead Man's Path.
Yeah.
2015.
So now we're on Century Media, and by we I mean Malevolent Creation, the band. We are not on Century Media. Dan Sueno produces this one, and I gotta give him some credit. It does sound sonically superior than the last string of garbage that we've had. He does bring a heaviness out of the band. The vocals are actually properly mixed. Everything's properly mixed. I mean, Dan Sueno is amazing, just an incredible producer and musician. But like, this is where it's like, yeah, they've got everything going for them. They're on a huge label. They've got an amazing producer, and the material is still the same Malevolent Creation that we've been dealing with, kind of for the past 10 years, maybe longer. I will have to admit that if I bought this record and had never heard anything else from the band, I would have said that it was okay. I don't think that it's total garbage. I don't think it's total like throwaway. I do think it sounds kind of on par with what you'd hear with any other extreme metal band, which is kind of a shame for a big, like for a legacy act, a band that's been around for this long puts out a record that like is just okay. Guys that have been around this long should be teaching the new guys how to do it, right? And like I said, this sounds fine. Like musically, it sounds pretty good. The tracks are okay. The tracks are pretty good. And you ever watch a really bad movie and you get really, really like a really bad movie can actually be really good if it's entertaining. What's the worst kind of bad movie? One that's just boring, nothing happens in it.
Serum
was super entertaining.
Absolutely was not entertaining at all, and that was why it was so terrible. There's a bad movie, and then there's a movie that gives you no emotional reaction, and that was Serum.
And that's Dead Man's Path for me. It's It's got good production value. I can't complain about that. But I can be like, wow, this is the band that put out Stillborn. This is the band that put out Eternal. You know, like it has no identity at this point.
Yeah, it's more disappointed dad from me. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's just, yep. Next.
It's 2015. I'm listening to a band that sonically sounds better than what I've been listening to for the past 10 years. But that is so far beyond acceptable because I've heard the best albums by this band and they were 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean, you get to a point, you know, it's almost like the definition of insanity. You just keep banging your head against the wall. It's not going to change. I mean, if you just keep trying to do the same thing, it's not like you're going to have this massive breakthrough. And yeah, you know, yes, they're jumping from producer to producer, but musically speaking, I mean, have we evolved or are we de-evolved?
I don't think you've evolved when you're playing this style of death metal. I think the worst thing you can do for your core fan base is evolve. But what you should never do is make your record sound like shit on purpose. This is repetitive to me. I've now heard 7 records of the exact same thing. It just sounds different. That's never a good decision because it doesn't stand out. There's nothing to make it sound better than who mixed the record and what they were allowed to do with their time and their energy and their tools.
Yeah, I mean, you can evolve in the essence of, like, you know, you can throw a wrinkle here or there to keep it interesting. I mean, that's what, you know, that's why part of the reason why we like Cannibal Corpse. There's wrinkles here and there. So I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that argument on the evolution. I mean, you can still stay within your stay in your lane, but you can still add little elements, you know, where you can still tell that yes, this is the same band, but here's a new wrinkle to keep it fresh and to keep it new and to keep you interested. I'm not asking for them to, you know, the next thing that they do, you know, be this absolutely, you know, doom metal, you know, greatness where I want to go in a corner and cry and kill myself. I mean, I'm not asking them to do that. I just want them to be better, and it just gotten to the point. They're the B-lister that's just not so bad that they're funny kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's not.
Well, we talk about that a lot on the show about, like, you know, B-tier bands, and there's been a few B-tier bands that we've been like, this should be A-tier. There's no reason why they shouldn't be one of the biggest bands in the world, you know, in whatever style. And then there's bands like Malevolent Creation that the B tier was kind of created for. And there's times where they slip down into C tier, sounding not all that different than an underground local band.
That's true.
On some records. And I do think that on these last 2, there is a little bit more of a push for it to at least sound on the level, you know, that it should sound like. But I mean, I wish I had something nice to say too. And it's hard because, you know, unfortunately, you know, in 2018, Brett Hoffman passed away from cancer at only 51. And, you know, we just sat there and just talked total trash about his band for, you know, an hour, you know. But it is one of those things where it sucks that I always like when things like this happen for me to have something like really, really, really positive to say. And I am very, very sad that he passed. You know, but as far as the music goes, that last record I think was probably the best sounding that they'd had in a while. But it is interesting to see that the band has continued after his death, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah, they brought Kyle back, didn't they?
No,
it's not Kyle. Who is it? I thought it was Kyle.
There's a different singer. There's a different singer on this record, and his name is Lee Wallenschlager.
Oh, okay.
Or Lee Wallenschlager, who does all the guitars and
Lee Wallenschlager.
Not all of the not all of the guitars, but he plays guitar and vocals and wrote all the lyrics. And of course, we're talking about the 13th Beast now. I don't know if we officially transitioned into that one or not.
I thought this was Todd McFarlane's Spawn mixed with the Predator.
Yeah, it's actually a really cool cover. I actually kind of like looking at it. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This one actually sounds pretty good. Like from a sonic perspective, it's one of their most well produced albums ever, as far as I can tell. I like it basically, but I think that it's also very boring. It sounds great. Just the material itself isn't super compelling. There's not a whole lot to go back to with it.
No, I get what you're saying. You know, it's one of those things, you know, where production quality is better, but it's not like they've sonically have improved. I mean, you're still, if you still listen to it, even if you grabbed some of the other albums that had the poor production quality and put it on this level, I mean, I don't think you're still not gonna say it's a good album. I think you'll say that it's palpable or tolerable, but it's not good.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess maybe for them that's good enough. I mean, I'm sure they got some hardcore fans that they're absolutely ecstatic about. You know, everybody has a special connection. You know, one of the things that's always big for me is, you know, seeing a band live. Sometimes that really changes, you know, an opinion. And it could be that these guys have like a fucking insane live show. And if I saw them, it would, you know, I'd totally change my tune because wow, do those guys have so much presence at a live show. And you end up taking back some of what you say about the, you know, the recorded material because, and they could just be a grinder. You know what I mean? They just could be one of those bands that just grinds it out on tour and they just, that's how they do it. And I don't know, but I'm just saying, you know, it could be that, you know, that's why they've been around this long is because they're tour monsters and everybody loves to go see these guys because they put on a hell of a show. I just don't know enough about them to say that that's exactly what they are.
I think it's okay that this is the best album you've heard in a while because the band overall sounds like death metal. They sound like an old school death metal band in 2019 that are still putting out heavy, brutal slam dance music, and that's okay. I mentioned the super fans earlier. I'm not the super fan for this, but this band clearly plays live and still gets paid to do this. So this is for someone. It's just not as good as what we had before, and we spent a lot of time listening to repetitive, bad-sounding albums to get here. So it might be a payoff in that way, but for me, I've heard the best albums, and it was a long time ago.
Yeah, and that's where I was talking about where I listened to stuff out of order. And musically speaking, I really didn't feel like there wasn't a huge shift from album to album. Sure, was there a difference in production quality? Yes. But musically speaking, I didn't feel that inspiration. I didn't feel inspired. Coming away from it, I didn't feel like they were inspired. And I think that's probably the most damning thing that you can say about a band is whenever you don't think the band is no longer inspired. That's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I think the one of the positives that you can take away is that if you're a Malevolent Creation fan, you do have a band that more or less sticks to their guns as far as sound goes. And what I mean by that is that there's so many bands we've talked about on the show have that weird musical arc where they do like the weird thing that nobody likes, and then maybe they go back to doing the thing that everybody likes or everybody expects them to do. You have a band that never went modern in the traditional sense. You know, they didn't go metal, they didn't go new metal in the 90s. Or rather, they didn't go alternative rock in the 90s, then new metal in the late 90s, then metalcore in the 2000s, and like follow all the trends and stuff. And I think that there is a lot of respect for bands that do things. There's a lot of respect for bands that don't do those things. And I think that's part of it. I mean, like I said, I don't think any of their albums are like, I'm listening to it and like they don't know what they're doing. You know, like there's not any like bad playing on the album or obvious mistakes. But I feel like some of the choices that were made production-wise were obvious mistakes. And I think some of the songs it seems to me that this is a band where possibly the songwriting was secondary to maybe touring all the time, like you said, Geoff, or, you know, or the merchandising or the image of the band or getting deals and things like that. Whereas, after a while, you're just clocking in and you're putting out the next Malevolent Creation album, and that's your job for this month or this year or whatever. And then as soon as you get it done, you get it pressed, you go right on the road and do the thing that you're going to do. And that's the only explanation I can really come up with for it, because I don't think that they're untalented, but I think that they just, for whatever reason, all the ducks lined up a few times, and then the rest of the time it was just kind of, you get what you get.
Well, shit, they can't tour right now because of COVID, so maybe the next album is going to be fucking smasher. Who knows?
Well, they can do what everybody else does. They can tour for a week and then cancel the tour.
Yeah, that's true.
Final thoughts on Malevolent Creation, Dan?
I think Malevolent Creation is a band that has probably 4 or 5 albums that are really, really good, and I'm gonna tell you it's usually the first 5. You might like the new 2019 one if that's the first one you're checking out, but I would recommend checking out like Eternal or Stillborn first and seeing where you go from there. Just don't go in expecting everything to be to that level.
Geoff, what about you?
For me, this is definitely a lesson in what might have been. First 5 albums, I think, are build progressively, especially, build progressively to the point where you're really going to enjoy this band. And then you make a couple of fatal errors and you got to live with the consequences if you decide not to change your ways. Some people, when they make a mistake, they just, they put their foot down and they just bear down and, they own that mistake and they will not move away from it. They will try to impress upon everybody else that mistake was actually the right thing to do. And I almost feel that way about the bulk of the rest of the band's discography. It's almost like somebody said, we're going to make this work. We're going to prove to everybody that this is how it's supposed to be. This is what it's supposed to sound like. And it's going to work. And I just don't think it ever did. And it's why I shit on them so much on this episode, is because it was almost like we're pleading with them, really. That's, a lot of what we're doing is we're pleading because we know what could have been. We really, really, really liked where they were going initially. And the rug was pulled out from underneath us. And instead of them apologizing, they're like, oh, yeah, that was funny. We're going to keep doing it. No, it wasn't. You just, own up to your mistake and move on just like everybody else in the world. And I just don't feel like that ever happened. I just felt like they stuck with it and to their detriment, really.
Dan talked about the B-grade bands, the ones that don't necessarily headline the show, but if you're around long enough, people will show up to see you do what you do. I think old school death metal has its fans. And for those people that want nothing but brutal and shitty sounding records, Malevolent Creation has that for you. But there are so many good records in the beginning, and the end is showing some promise. So I don't want to say the band is not for me, because there's a large portion of the discography that just does not make sense. But for the early days and for what recently came out, I'm going to say the band is worth listening to. But you're not going to get variety. If you listen to Opeth and think you like death metal, you're not going to get melodic passages mixed in with heavy.
But I mean, Dan Swano recorded that one record. Right? That counts, right?
Malevolent Creation might be exactly what you're looking for. It's not exactly what I'm looking for, but I did have a good time with some of these records this week. So listen to Malevolent Creation. You might have to get off the train more than once, but that's okay. The train keeps rolling even if you decide to get off at the stop at the end of the track. Geoff, what's your album of the week?
Well, it turned, as of the recording of this, just a few days ago, turned 20 years old, which is hard for me to believe. And that is Jane Doe by Converge.
Dan, what about you?
Well, I'd say death metal's been kind of my theme of the month. So I've been listening to, the only album that you could listen to after listening to all of that Malevolent Creation. And that would be Violence Unimagined by Cannibal Corpse.
For me, it's Slipknot, Iowa. It has been a long time since I sat down and only listened to Iowa, and Dan made a strong case that Iowa might be the heaviest album ever released, so I wanted to test that theory. I'm not subscribing to it just yet, but it was a good throwback to listen to Iowa effectively the same way I did the first time I heard it, because it had been such a long time since I just enjoyed that kind of heavy and absurdity that Slipknot became known for. And maybe Dan will make a video on YouTube about why Iowa is the heaviest album of all time.
I mean, what I said was that, it's the heaviest album of all time from a certain point of view.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's actually, since you spoke of Iowa, there's, I forgot to say earlier, there's a Mick Thompson sighting on one of these albums. I don't know if you guys knew that on Doomsday
Oh, yeah,
X.
yeah. It was Doomsday X, right? Yeah.
Yeah, on Doomsday X, Mick Thompson is actually a guest guitarist on I can't remember the track, but it's not like it was memorable.
Deliver My Enemy from Doomsday X.
Oh, okay. If you say so.
I'm saying it. I'm saying it's true. You can go listen to it.
I know. I'm just messing with you, buddy.
Take us out, DFT.
If you've ever been listening to this podcast and you would like to be more directly involved in what bands that we talk about, you're gonna have to reach out to us and tell us. We can't read your mind. So, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can tell us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can tell us on Twitter at discussmetal or on Instagram at discussmetal. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. And you can always join our Discord server. It's going to be a link in the show notes that'll take you right to our Discord server that is hopping with people just like you that want to talk about the show. They want to tell us we were right. They want to tell us we were wrong. You can do both of those things as much as you want on the Discord server, as long as you stay respectful and don't be mean to people. You're good.
Yeah, don't
You're
be
good
mean
to
to
go.
people like how I was mean to Malevolent Creation.
Exactly. That's why you don't see Geoff on the server. He gets banned every couple of days. So we got to throw him off of there. But guys, keep checking out the podcasts. Keep subscribing, keep sharing the episodes, keep leaving reviews. We appreciate every single one of you guys, and we will see you next week.
And on that note, this has been episode 239 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.